In this video, we will talk about the rising importance of both ESG generally and ESG disclosures. So let's start with the question of why. Why are more and more actors from business and finance and beyond really talking about ESG risks and opportunities? The first thing to point to is that we live in a period of human history where ESG risks are materializing and becoming real on a regular basis. Ideas that were once considered quite theoretical in nature or mid to long term are really entering our lives in tangible ways on a more regular basis. And that is reshaping the level of urgency with which business and finance look to address them. If we think back to the summer of 2021, across the world from California to Australia and Central Europe, we've seen extreme weather events in the form of both fires and floods cause immense damage from both human and financial perspective. In our highly digitalized working environment, concerns now over privacy rights, the ability of businesses to protect themselves against cyber attacks, as well as the impacts of long-term remote working on the workforce. These are all challenges that, again, business and finance have to tackle now and not in 10 years' time. Demographic changes are also influencing the ESG conversation. So for many B2C industries, for example, being able to demonstrate the responsible and sustainable business practices, being able to bring to market green products and services, this is widely considered to be something that adds to the overall brand value as well as the employer value proposition, particularly for a younger generation of consumers. Simultaneously, as our leaders across business and finance are living longer, they are recognizing that the sustainability challenges that they are being asked to address, these are not risks that will be passed down to the next generation. These are risks that will be felt within their own lifetimes. And again, that is triggering more urgency to act. We also live in an era where a more top-down approach is starting to emerge, with more and more regulations coming into play to try and bring consistency, transparency, and greater order to ESG investing, ESG disclosures, and also how ESG products in the financial markets are developed as well. And finally, when we compare where we are to the turn of the previous century, there is just a much greater appreciation of how the private sector and its actions will shape the sustainable outcomes of our economies and of our planet. To give the example of the technology sector, it will find itself much closer to key discussions around free speech, the protection of children's rights, the future of education, as well as upholding democracy and democratic values. So with all of that context said, if we focus specifically on the ESG investing landscape, we'll still face quite a diverse environment that's continuing to evolve and continuing to innovate. So it goes without saying that today there's no singular type of sustainable or responsible investor. Motivations, approaches, and tools all vary. In terms of regulation, whilst we might see some common objectives across the different regions of the world in terms of what regulations are trying to address, we're certainly still seeing more of a proliferation of standards that is very complex for global investors to navigate with certainty. Within the ESG investing market, there is a very rigorous debate going on over approaches to materiality, with more mature participants really looking to understand two key concepts: how ESG factors impact financial materiality, but also how businesses can impact sustainable value creation for their stakeholders as well. And then finally, whilst climate action may have dominated market discussions and actions since the launch of the Paris Agreement in 2015, the results or the impacts of rising inequality, the aftermath of the global pandemic, and other major events are really diversifying the types of risks and opportunities that investors are being asked to factor into their work and help address. So with that context set, how can we then describe or articulate the value of ESG disclosures for investors and companies? So for investors, ESG disclosures can really help them on several fronts: risk identification, understanding the risk management practices of investee companies, but also just having more transparency on the sustainability performance of a business. This final element can be a key indicator to help investors to understand what is the purpose of a company beyond profit, and also serves as a strong indicator of how companies are managing their relations with the full range of their stakeholders and not just their shareholders. Similarly, for companies, ESG disclosures can help them on several fronts. There's a clear risk management lens to this. A stronger understanding of ESG factors can help a company identify more accurately and more broadly the kinds of risks that its business may face or pose to the planet. With the growth of the sustainable bonds and loan market, companies can also increasingly leverage their ESG performance as well as their forward-looking ESG targets to finance key projects and transitions. And again, with the shift to a more regulated environment, ESG is now becoming something that's beyond the focus of just CSR teams or sustainability teams, and is increasingly becoming a key issue for compliance teams, procurement teams, legal, and more. The final thing we would point to here is, as mentioned earlier, for companies, ESG and sustainability are likely to increase in terms of their importance, in terms of their contribution to the overall brand value proposition and employee proposition of the business. Thank you very much.